tell you what, my friends, The Price is Right left an outsized impression on me from childhood. I didn't even get to watch that show hardly ever because it was on during school, and I guess I could watch it on weekdays in the summer, but who's doing that? If you grew up in the 80s or 90s and it's the summer, you just put on a helmet and go outside and fight things and run around the neighborhood and do whatever until it gets dark, and then you go home. That's how childhood was. You're not watching TV. Are you kidding me? But if you called in sick and it's cold out anyway because it's winter and you can't go anywhere, your cover will be blown, you watch The Price is Right. It comes on right after cartoons. And I remember watching this show and just imagining that this was the height of opulence. We didn't have a lot growing up. And so when there's just some random game that they're going to play, like, you know, we're going to play Guanco, and then you bring up the winner and they're up there and they're like, all right, what are we playing for? And then it's like $1,000. That would melt my brain. Are you kidding me? If that lady wins this, she's going to get $1,000, which is still a lot of money, but it was crazy money back then. But then every now and then, they'd be like, oh, what are you playing for? And the guy would be like, oh, $1,000. And I'd start sweating, like puffing my shirt a little bit just to keep the air flowing. And then he'd be like, and also, and then a wall would just disappear. They had disappearing walls, a new car. And there'd be like a Yugo back there or something. And then you think that's everything that could have possibly, that anybody could ever want. Like more joy than anybody could comprehend in a single moment. Another door would open, or a wall would disappear, and there'd be some pretty lady back there like, and a new kitchen. Like, are you kidding me? And then another wall would disappear and be like, and a trip to Tahiti. It was all the things that I could ever imagine anybody wanting. And every time I thought that was the height of opulence that Bob Barker could possibly heap upon any one person, they would just heap on more. And that, my friends, is literally, exactly, precisely, 100% inarguably analogous with what's happening here in Ezra chapter 7. Because Ezra, it looks like he just wants to go back to Jerusalem and be a priest and do priest things and maybe whip the people into shape a little bit and kind of complete the second part of the task of rebuilding that needs to happen during the era of the return from exile that we've been looking at here in the 500s and the 400s BC. Now we're into the reign of Artaxerxes. Ezra tells us things that happened before he was alive or paying attention, but now we're into his prime. And apparently he had some kind of relationship with Artaxerxes. And apparently Artaxerxes had a soft spot for the Jewish people. And it looks like somewhere off screen, Ezra and some other Jews were like, hey, we got to go back and do this thing in the tradition of your father and your grandfather. And what would Cyrus be to Artaxerxes? Your great second uncle once removed by marriage. I don't know. It was a long ways, but whatever. It all worked. In the honor of that tradition of them being friends to the Jewish people, would you, O great Artaxerxes, be friends to the Jewish people as well? And so in Ezra 7, we get this letter where Artaxerxes, much like Rod Roddy and Bob Barker, is going to reveal what he's going to give to Ezra the priest and the Jewish people. So the question here, the tension here is, will Artaxerxes look upon them with not favor? And we get the impression that there were some mean letters written about the Jews back during the 500s during the rebuilding part that made it to the desk of Artaxerxes. I mean, the resistance to the Jews made it all the way up to the time of Artaxerxes. So is he going to listen to those letters and be like, no, Ezra, you get nothing. You want to know what's behind that door? You're playing for a goat. That's right, a goat. That actually would have been probably a good prize back then. I think most people would have been pretty excited to get a goat from the king. Not the best example. I don't know. The analogy breaks down right there. Something bad that people back then wouldn't want. Is that what Artaxerxes is going to say that you're going to get if you're Ezra? Or is he going to start sliding doors open here and be like, no, not only did you get what you asked for, but you also get a car and a kitchen and Tahiti, obviously, metaphorically, because the Persians hadn't discovered Tahiti yet. And it's the latter. I wouldn't be telling you the story if it wasn't the latter. Artaxerxes is all over. He likes the Jews. And he even writes a letter to just heap awesomeness upon Ezra. And so we're in Ezra 7. This is straight from Artaxerxes. This is pretty cool. This is a historical document. I'm going to read you this thing. So Artaxerxes, King of Kings, to Ezra the priest, a teacher of the law of the God of heaven. This is Ezra 7, verse 12. Greetings. Now I decree that any of the Israelites in my kingdom, including priests and Levites who wish to go to Jerusalem with you, may go. You are sent by the king and his 7 advisors to inquire about Judah and Jerusalem with regard to the law of your God, which is in your hand. Now, there's an interesting little history note there. Did you catch it? There's still 7 great advisors to this Achaemenid king. We haven't really talked about that here, but if you caught the first 42 episodes of season 3 on the book of Esther, then you might remember that extra-biblical historians tell us that there were 7 co-conspirators who worked together to get rid of who they said was a fake liar king, Bardia, the son of Cyrus the Great, and to replace him with the true and rightful king, the guy who came to be known as Darius the Great. And the descendants of these 7 families continued to be the inner circle of the king, the inner circle of advisors. So I think this is a nod to that Achaemenid political tradition and reality here when he says you are sent by the king and his 7 advisors. That's pretty cool. Verse 15. Moreover, you are to take with you the silver and gold that the king and his advisors have freely given to the God of Israel, whose dwelling is in Jerusalem, together with all the silver and gold you may obtain from the province of Babylon, as well as the freewill offerings of the people and priests for the temple of their God in Jerusalem. With this money, be sure to buy bulls, rams, and male lambs, together with their grain offerings and drink offerings, and sacrifice them on the altar of the temple of your God in Jerusalem. Well, this is fantastic. The first part of the showcase is that Ezra gets to go back, and he has the blessing to culturally nurture the Israelite people in a culture that is different than Persian culture. A lot of governments wouldn't give you that freedom. Probably most governments in history wouldn't give you that freedom. The state is everything. The state perpetuates the state. This is the primary objective of the state. If you think otherwise, that's adorable and is an opinion that I guess somebody could have. No, governments perpetuate governments. That's what they inevitably must end up doing. So what's Persia doing here? Are they trying to perpetuate their own power and existence? Or would they be cool if the whole thing just came undone and they're just more interested in being nice to their subjects than they are in preserving their kingdom? Well, no, it's not like that. Persia's still a government doing government things, but they're choosing the good cop approach, and I like the good cop approach way, way better. It would seem that government is an inevitable thing that we're going to organize up into and do. A lot of good can come out of government, the adjudication of disputes, the protection of the smallest minority, which is the individual, against the oppressive action of subgroups within society, organizations, even corporations, other governments, the government itself. There's all kinds of awesome things that government can do, and it seems to do them the most when it chooses this more freedom-oriented approach. But still, the thinking here is, well, all the other empires of the ancient world tried this super iron fisty approach. We're going to do that sometimes. You got to have an iron fist every now and then. It's the ancient world. Come on. But Persia, more than anybody, seemed inclined from the very beginning with Cyrus on to say, what do we do this other way? Is it possible that that might work? And let's be a little lavish with it. And maybe there's also a bit of an element here of these Persian kings, Cyrus, Darius, Xerxes, and now Artaxerxes, saying, let's hedge our bets a little bit with these gods. I think Ahura Mazda is the one true god, but maybe Ahura Mazda manifests in multiple ways. Maybe these other people have a point as well, and Ahura Mazda doesn't seem to be threatened by us offering sacrifices to these other gods. So let's just do it. And obviously in that regard, the Persians are very, very different in terms of how they think about monotheism and idolatry than the Jews are. I mean, the Jews would do a massive spit take over the suggestion that maybe they should just sacrifice to some other gods as well to try to, just hedge their bets a little bit. Well, this era of Jews would. Pretty much every era of the Hebrews and the Israelites before this were down for dabbling in the worship of other gods on the side for most of the Old Testament. And as you know, that's kind of how we got here. But the point is, the price is right. The prizes just keep adding up and getting more awesomer. So now we're getting the blessing to go and rebuild things. We're getting a mountain of gold, not just from the royal treasury, but also you're allowed to go and raise funds for the project in Babylon. This isn't even a building project. You're just raising missionary funds in a way to go and disciple the Jewish people and how to be more Jewish, more exclusive in their beliefs. That's a remarkably comfortable in his own skin gesture on the part of Artaxerxes. And then Artaxerxes seems to have some knowledge about how the Jewish religion works. He knows what the sacrifices are supposed to be like, and he's approving of these sacrifices being offered not to Ahura Mazda, the god that Artaxerxes claims gives him his mandate of heaven to hold the throne, but to the God of Israel. I'm strategizing here, and it is becoming clear to me we're not going to get all the way through this awesome letter from Artaxerxes in one day. No problem, we got time. We'll split it into 2 days. So we'll just pick up right where we left off with Artaxerxes piling treasures and prizes on Ezra and his fellow returning exiles tomorrow. Hey, real quick, though, before we pause here, just wanted to say thanks to everybody who's written any kind of review on any of the different podcast platforms. I keep reading them. I found another trove of these on a couple of apps that I'd never looked at before. And so, I mean, a couple of them are kind of old, but they're really nice. And those are just fun. Those are a blast. And all the podcast apps love ratings and reviews. And if you write one of those or you leave a rating, that's like sharing it with 100 people. It's the easiest way ever to invite people to our conversation. All right, now that's actually it. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.